The entire restaurant fell silent. Every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died. The only sound in the fancy dining room was the soft jazz music playing in the background. But even that seemed to fade away as everyone stared at the young waitress standing tall in front of the most powerful man in New York City. Her voice had been calm, but her words cut through the air like a knife. The billionaire's face went from angry red to pale white in seconds. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in his life, Daniel Richardson, the man who owned half of Manhattan, was completely speechless. The waitress, Isabella Martinez, stood there with her head held high. Her uniform was simple, her hands were shaking slightly, but her eyes burned with a fire that made everyone in that fancy restaurant hold their breath. What could a 26-year-old waitress possibly say to freeze a room full of the richest people in the city? What words could make a billionaire who never backed down from anyone look like he'd seen a ghost? Let me take you back to where this incredible story began. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. 3 hours earlier, the morning sun was shining through the small window of Isabella's tiny apartment in Queens. She was rushing around, trying to get her 7-year-old daughter, Mia, ready for school while also preparing for what she knew would be another exhausting day at Grandeur, one of the fanciest restaurants in all of New York. "Mama, can we go to the park this weekend?" Mia asked, tugging on Isabella's apron as she packed her daughter's lunch. Isabella's heart broke a little. When was the last time they had gone anywhere fun together? Between working at Grandeur during the day and cleaning offices at night, she barely had time to breathe, let alone take Mia to the park. "We'll see, baby," Isabella said softly, kissing the top of Mia's head. "Mama has to work hard so we can have nice things." Mia nodded, but Isabella could see the sadness in her little girl's eyes. At only 7 years old, Mia was already learning that life wasn't fair. Her father had left when she was just 2, and since then, it had been just the two of them against the world. After dropping Mia off at school, Isabella took the subway into Manhattan. As the train rattled through the tunnels, she thought about her dreams. She had once wanted to be a teacher, to help kids learn and grow. But when Mia was born and her boyfriend disappeared, those dreams had to be put away. Now, her only dream was to give her daughter a better life than she'd had. The restaurant, Grandeur, was already buzzing with activity when Isabella arrived. The head chef was yelling at the kitchen staff, servers were setting up tables with perfect white tablecloths, and the manager, Mr. Peterson, was walking around making sure everything looked perfect. "Isabella," Mr. Peterson called out as soon as he saw her. "Thank goodness you're here early. We have a very special guest coming today." Isabella tied her apron and grabbed her notepad. "Who is it, Mr. Peterson?" "Daniel Richardson," he said in a hushed voice, like he was talking about the president or a movie star. Isabella had heard that name before. Everyone in New York had. Daniel Richardson was one of the richest men in America. He owned hotels, restaurants, and buildings all over the city. He was also known for being extremely difficult to please. Other waitresses had told stories about how he had made servers cry and even gotten people fired just because they looked at him the wrong way. "He always sits at table 7, Mr. Peterson continued. "And Isabella, he's very particular. Don't talk unless he asks you a question. Don't smile too much. And whatever you do, don't make any mistakes. Last month, he got a waitress at another restaurant fired because she brought him the wrong kind of water." Isabella's stomach twisted into knots. She had been working at Grandeur for 2 years, and she was good at her job. But serving someone like Daniel Richardson was different. One wrong move could cost her everything. The morning shift went by quickly. Isabella served breakfast to business people and tourists, always with a smile and excellent service. She was known for remembering customers' names and their favorite orders. Mrs. Chun always wanted her coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of cream. Mr. Johnson liked his eggs over easy with wheat toast, no butter. But as lunchtime approached, Isabella could feel the tension in the restaurant growing. Everyone knew Daniel Richardson was coming, and everyone was nervous. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the front door opened, and he walked in. Daniel Richardson was a tall man with silver hair and expensive clothes. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Isabella made in 6 months. But it wasn't his clothes that made people notice him. It was the way he carried himself. Like he owned everything and everyone around him. The restaurant manager almost ran to greet him, practically bowing as he led him to table 7. Isabella watched from across the room as other servers whispered and pointed. Some looked scared. Others looked curious. "Sarah will take care of table 7 today," Mr. Peterson announced to the staff. Isabella felt relieved. She could serve her regular customers and avoid the stress of dealing with the most demanding man in New York. But then disaster struck. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the front door opened and he walked in. Daniel Richardson was a tall man with silver hair and expensive clothes. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Isabella made in 6 months. But it wasn't his clothes that made people notice him. It was the way he carried himself. Like he owned everything and everyone around him. The restaurant manager almost ran to greet him, practically bowing as he led him to table 7. Isabella watched from across the room as other servers whispered and pointed. Some looked scared. Others looked curious. "Sarah will take care of table 7 today," Mr. Peterson announced to the staff. Isabella felt relieved. She could serve her regular customers and avoid the stress of dealing with the most demanding man in New York. But then disaster struck. Sarah, who had been chosen to serve Daniel Richardson, suddenly doubled over in pain. "My stomach," she gasped. "I think it's food poisoning from lunch yesterday." Mr. Peterson's face went white. Sarah was the most experienced server they had, and now she couldn't work. He looked around the room at the other servers, but most of them were already busy with their own tables. His eyes landed on Isabella. "Isabella," he said quietly, "you're going to have to take table 7. Isabella's heart started pounding. "But Mr. Peterson, I've never served anyone like him before. What if I mess up?" "You won't," he said firmly. "You're one of our best servers. Just remember what I told you. Don't talk unless he asks you something. Be invisible but perfect." Isabella took a deep breath and walked toward table 7. With each step, she felt like she was walking toward her doom. She could feel other customers watching her, probably wondering if she was about to become Daniel Richardson's next victim. As she got closer, she could hear him talking on his phone. His voice was cold and sharp. "I don't care what the construction workers say," he was saying. "If they can't finish the building on time, fire them all and find new ones. I'm not paying for excuses." Isabella stood next to the table, waiting for him to finish his call. She could smell his expensive cologne and see his gold watch that probably cost more than her car. Everything about him screamed money and power. Finally, he hung up the phone and looked at her. His eyes were cold blue, like ice. "You're not my usual server," he said. It wasn't a question. "No, sir. Sarah is sick today. My name is Isabella, and I'll be taking care of you." He looked her up and down like he was inspecting a used car. "Fine. I want the salmon cooked exactly medium. Not medium rare, not medium well. Medium. The vegetables should be crisp, not mushy. And I want sparkling water, not tap water, with exactly 2 lemon slices." Isabella wrote everything down carefully. "Would you like an appetizer, sir?" "Did I ask for an appetizer?" His voice was sharp. "No, sir. Sorry, sir. Don't apologize. Just do your job." Isabella hurried to the kitchen to place his order. The chef, Carlos, was a kind man who had always been nice to her. "You got Richardson?" Carlos asked, raising his eyebrows. "Yeah. He wants the salmon medium, vegetables crisp, and sparkling water with 2 lemon slices." "Don't worry, Isabella. I'll make sure his food is perfect. That man has ruined too many servers' days already." While waiting for the food, Isabella served her other tables. But she kept glancing over at Daniel Richardson, who was typing on his laptop and making phone calls. Every few minutes, he would look around the restaurant like he was looking for something to complain about. 20 minutes later, Carlos called out that the order was ready. Isabella carefully carried the plate to table 7, making sure not to spill anything. "Your salmon, sir," she said, Placing the plate in front of him, Daniel Richardson cut into the fish and took a bite. Isabella held her breath, waiting for his reaction. He chewed slowly, his face showing no emotion. Then he put down his fork and looked up at her. "This salmon is overcooked," he said loudly. "I specifically said medium, and this is well done." Isabella looked at the salmon. It looked perfectly cooked to her, and she knew Carlos was an excellent chef who never made mistakes like that. "I'm sorry, sir. I can have the chef prepare another one." "Sorry doesn't fix my wasted time," he interrupted, his voice getting louder. Other customers were starting to look over. "Do you have any idea how much money I lose for every minute I sit here eating poorly prepared food?" Isabella's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She could feel everyone in the restaurant looking at them now. "Let me get the manager, sir." "No," Daniel Richardson said, standing up from his chair. He was much taller than Isabella, and now he was using his height to intimidate her. "I want you to explain to me how a second-rate waitress thinks she can serve me garbage and get away with it." The words hit Isabella like a slap. Second-rate waitress? She had been working hard for 2 years, always polite to customers, always trying her best. And she wasn't serving him garbage. The food was perfectly fine. But she bit her tongue. She needed this job. Mia needed her to keep this job. "I apologize, sir. I'll have a new salmon prepared right away." "You'll have a new salmon prepared by someone who actually knows what they're doing," he said, his voice now loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Because clearly you don't." Isabella felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she fought them back. She would not cry in front of this man. She would not give him the satisfaction. "Furthermore," Daniel Richardson continued, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting from the other customers, "I want to know why a restaurant of this caliber would hire someone who obviously doesn't belong here. Look at her." He gestured toward Isabella like she was a piece of furniture. "Does she look like she belongs in a place like this?" That's when something inside Isabella snapped. She had been poor her whole life. She had worked 2 jobs to support her daughter. She had sacrificed her dreams, her social life, even her sleep to make sure Mia had food and clothes and a safe place to live. She had been insulted, looked down on, and treated like she was worth nothing by people who had been born with money they never had to work for. But she had never been humiliated like this. Not in front of a room full of strangers. Not for doing her best at a job she needed to survive. Isabella looked up at Daniel Richardson, this man who thought his money made him better than everyone else. This man who thought he could destroy people just because he could afford to. And for the first time in her life, Isabella Martinez decided she wasn't going to take it anymore. She took a deep breath, looked him straight in the eyes, and said the words that would change everything. Isabella looked Daniel Richardson straight in the eyes, her voice steady but filled with power that surprised even herself. "Sir, you can insult my cooking, you can complain about my service, but you cannot insult who I am as a person. Because unlike you, I earn my respect every single day." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in that expensive restaurant stopped what they were doing. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the soft jazz music seemed to fade into nothing. Daniel Richardson's face changed from angry red to shocked white. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For a man who was used to getting his way with everyone everywhere all the time, this was completely new territory. But Isabella wasn't done. "You want to know if I belong here?" she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I've been working since I was 16 years old. I worked 2 jobs, 7 days a week, to take care of my daughter. I know every customer's name, their favorite orders, and I remember their birthdays. Can you say the same about the people who work for you?" The other customers were now openly staring. Some had their phones out, probably recording what was happening. A few business people at a nearby table were whispering to each other, but their eyes never left the confrontation. Daniel Richardson finally found his voice. "How dare you speak to me like that? Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, I do," Isabella replied calmly. "You're Daniel Richardson. You own Richardson Hotels, Richardson Properties, and half the buildings in the city. You're worth about $4 billion. according to the newspapers. And right now, you're acting like a spoiled child because your fish wasn't cooked exactly the way you wanted it. A woman at table 3 actually gasped out loud. No one had ever heard anyone speak to Daniel Richardson like this. Ever. But something strange was happening to Isabella. The fear she had felt just moments ago was completely gone. Instead, she felt free, like she had been carrying a heavy weight on her shoulders for years, and now it was finally lifted. "You think your money makes you better than me," she continued. "But I know something you don't know, Mr. Richardson." Daniel Richardson's eyes narrowed. "What could you possibly know that I don't?" Isabella took a step closer to him. She was much shorter than he was, but somehow, in that moment, she seemed to tower over him. "I know why you eat alone." The color drained completely from Daniel Richardson's face. Around the restaurant, people leaned forward in their chairs, trying to hear every word. "I know why you come to different restaurants every week, but you never bring anyone with you. I know why you make phone calls during your meals instead of having conversations with friends. And I know why you treat people the way you do." "You don't know anything about me?" Daniel Richardson said, but his voice was quieter now, less confident. "Don't I?" Isabella asked. "You're lonely, Mr. Richardson. You have all the money in the world, but you don't have a single person who actually cares about you. So you come to places like this and you hurt people like me because it makes you feel powerful. But deep down, you know the truth." The restaurant was so quiet now that you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. Every single person was hanging on Isabella's every word. "What truth?" Daniel Richardson whispered. "That all your money can't buy you the one thing you actually want," Isabella said softly. "Love, real love. The kind that doesn't care how much money you have or what kind of car you drive. The kind of love I have with my daughter, who thinks I'm the most important person in the world, even though I can only afford to buy her clothes from thrift stores." Daniel Richardson just stared at her. For a moment, Isabella thought she saw something different in his cold blue eyes. Was it sadness? But then his expression hardened again. "You're fired," he said coldly. "I want you out of this restaurant right now." "Sir, you can't fire me," Isabella said calmly. "You don't work here." "No, but I can make sure you never work in any restaurant in this city again. Do you know how many restaurant owners owe me money? How many of them rent their buildings from me?" Isabella felt her heart sink. She had stood up for herself, but now she might lose everything. How would she pay rent? How would she buy food for Mia? But before she could respond, something unexpected happened. "Actually, you can't do that either." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was an elderly man sitting at table 12. He was well-dressed but not flashy, with kind eyes and gray hair. Isabella had served him lunch several times before, but she had never learned his name. The man stood up and walked over to where Isabella and Daniel Richardson were standing. "Who are you?" Daniel Richardson demanded. "My name is Robert Chun," the man said calmly, "and I think you should know something before you threaten this young lady's career." Isabella's eyes widened. "Chun? Like Mrs. Chun, who came in every morning for coffee with 2 sugars and cream. Could this be her husband?" "I've been coming to this restaurant for 3 years," Robert Chun continued. "And in all that time, Isabella has been nothing but kind, professional, and hardworking. She remembers my wife's coffee order even when my wife forgets it herself. She asks about our grandchildren and remembers their names. She once stayed late to help me when I couldn't figure out how to call a taxi on my phone." Daniel Richardson looked annoyed. "That's very nice, but I don't see how this concerns you." "It concerns me," Robert Chun said with a small smile, "because I own this restaurant." The entire room gasped. Isabella's jaw dropped. Mr. Peterson, who had been watching from across the room, looked like he might faint. Robert Chun owned grandeur, but he was so humble, so kind. He never acted like a boss or an owner. He just came in for lunch like any other customer. "I also own 7 other restaurants in Manhattan," Robert Chun continued. "And I have to say, Mr. Richardson, your behavior today has been absolutely unacceptable." Daniel Richardson's face was turning red again, but this time it looked more like embarrassment than anger. "This salmon," Richardson said, cutting a small piece from Daniel Richardson's plate and tasting it. Is cooked perfectly. Our chef, Carlos, has been working in fine dining for 20 years. Isabella took your order correctly and served it promptly and professionally. The only problem with your dining experience today has been your attitude. Isabella couldn't believe what was happening. The quiet, kind man she had been serving for 3 years was actually her boss, and he was defending her against one of the most powerful men in New York. Furthermore, Richardson continued, Isabella is one of our most valued employees. She's never been late, never been rude to a customer, and has received more compliments from guests than any other server we've had. If anyone should be asked to leave this restaurant, it should be you. The silence that followed was different from before. Before, it had been the shocked silence of people watching a confrontation. Now, it was the uncomfortable silence of people watching a bully get called out by someone even more powerful than he was. Daniel Richardson looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at him. For the first time, Isabella saw something in his expression that she hadn't seen before: shame. I didn't realize, he started to say, then stopped. Didn't realize what? Richardson asked gently. That the people who serve you are human beings? That they have families and feelings and dignity? Daniel Richardson didn't answer. He just stood there, looking smaller somehow than he had when he first walked into the restaurant. But then something even more surprising happened. A little girl's voice cut through the silence. Mama! Everyone turned toward the entrance of the restaurant. Standing in the doorway, holding the hand of Isabella's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was Mia. She was still wearing her school uniform, and her big brown eyes were wide with confusion as she looked around the fancy restaurant. Mia, Isabella said, her heart starting to pound with worry. What are you doing here? What's wrong? Mrs. Rodriguez hurried over, looking apologetic. I'm so sorry, Isabella. The school called because Mia had a fever, but you weren't answering your phone. They gave me your work address from the emergency contact form. Isabella's phone was in her locker in the back room. She always had to put it away during her shift. She rushed over to Mia and knelt down, feeling her forehead. Her daughter was definitely warm. Oh, baby, are you feeling sick? Isabella asked, her voice full of concern. My tummy hurts, Mama, Mia said softly, and my head feels funny. Isabella's heart broke. Here she was, dealing with a difficult customer and workplace drama, while her little girl was sick and needed her. This was exactly the kind of situation she worried about every day. What would happen if Mia needed her while she was at work? It's okay, baby. Mama's going to take you home right now, Isabella said, picking Mia up in her arms. As she held her daughter, Isabella suddenly realized that everyone in the restaurant was still watching them, including Daniel Richardson, who was staring at Mia with a strange expression on his face. This is your daughter? He asked quietly. Yes, Isabella said, not sure why he was asking. How old is she? 7, Isabella replied, wondering where this was going. Daniel Richardson was quiet for a long moment, just looking at Mia. Then he said something that shocked everyone even more than anything else that had happened that day. She looks just like my daughter did when she was that age. The restaurant fell silent again. Isabella stared at him in confusion. Your daughter had... Daniel Richardson corrected himself, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked like my daughter when she was 7 years old. Richardson, who had been standing nearby, suddenly looked very sad. Daniel, he said gently, is this about Emma? Daniel Richardson's eyes filled with tears. Emma would have been 25 this year, he said to no one in particular. She died in a car accident when she was 8. Isabella felt her anger toward him melt away completely. She couldn't imagine losing Mia. The thought alone made her want to hold her daughter tighter. I'm so sorry, Isabella said softly. After she died, my wife left me. Daniel Richardson continued, as if he couldn't stop the words from coming out. She said I worked too much, that I wasn't there when Emma needed me. She was right. I thought making money was the most important thing. I thought providing for my family meant working all the time and missing soccer games and bedtime stories. Mia, who had been quietly listening from her mother's arms, looked up at the tall man with curious eyes. "Why are you crying, mister?" she asked in her sweet 7-year-old voice. Daniel Richardson wiped his eyes and looked down at her. "Because I miss my little girl." "Where did she go?" Mia asked innocently. "She went to heaven," Daniel Richardson said, his voice breaking. Mia thought about this for a moment, then said, "My daddy went away too, but Mama says he didn't go to heaven. She says he just didn't want to be a daddy anymore. I think your little girl going to heaven is better, because that means she still loves you." The words hit Daniel Richardson like a physical blow. He sat down heavily in his chair, covering his face with his hands. The entire restaurant watched as this powerful, intimidating man broke down completely. All his money, all his power, all his anger, none of it could protect him from the grief he had been carrying for 17 years. Isabella looked around the room at all the people staring. Then she made a decision that surprised even herself. Still holding Mia, she walked over to Daniel Richardson and sat down in the chair across from him. "Mr. Richardson," she said gently, "would you like to tell me about Emma?" He looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "Why would you want to hear about her, after everything I said to you?" "Because," Isabella said, adjusting Mia in her lap, "I think you've been carrying this pain alone for too long, and I think Emma would want someone to remember her with love, not anger." For the next hour, as Mia dozed in her mother's arms and the other restaurant customers quietly finished their meals, Daniel Richardson told Isabella about his daughter. He told her about Emma's love for horses and her collection of stuffed animals. He told her about the way she used to make pancakes on Saturday mornings and how she insisted on reading bedtime stories to him instead of the other way around. And as he talked, something incredible happened. The cold, angry man who had walked into the restaurant that day began to disappear, replaced by a grieving father who had forgotten how to let people get close to him. But just as Isabella was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, this story might have a happy ending, Daniel Richardson's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face immediately hardened again. "I have to take this," he said, his voice becoming cold once more. "It's about a very important business deal." As he answered the phone, Isabella heard him say words that made her blood run cold. "Yes, I know we're supposed to demolish the building tomorrow. I don't care if there are still people living there. Business is business." Isabella's heart stopped. She recognized that address. It was her address. Daniel Richardson was about to tear down the apartment building where she and Mia lived. Isabella's hands began to shake as she heard Daniel Richardson's words through his phone. The apartment building on Maple Street, that was her home. That was where she and Mia had lived for the past 3 years. It was the only stable thing in their lives. "Wait," she whispered, but Daniel was still talking on the phone. "I don't care if the demolition crew has to work all night," he was saying coldly. "That building comes down tomorrow morning. I have investors flying in from Tokyo next week, and they want to see the construction site ready to go." Isabella felt sick. Just moments ago, she had felt sorry for this man. She had listened to him talk about his daughter with such love and pain. But now he was about to destroy her life without even knowing it. "Mr. Richardson," she said, louder this time. He held up a finger, telling her to wait while he finished his call. "No, I don't want to hear about the families who haven't found new places to live yet. I gave them 6 months' notice. That's more than the law requires." 6 months' notice? Isabella thought back to the letter she had received. It had been exactly 6 months ago. She remembered crying when she read it, then spending weeks trying to find another apartment she could afford. But everything was too expensive or too far from Mia's school, or in neighborhoods that weren't safe. She had been hoping the demolition would be delayed. Maybe the city would step in. Maybe there would be some kind of miracle. She never imagined she would be sitting across from the man responsible, watching him order the destruction of her home while her sick daughter slept in her arms. Daniel finished his call and looked back at Isabella. For a moment, his expression softened again as he looked at Mia. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "Emma used to fall asleep like that when she was tired." "Mr. Richardson," Isabella said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What building were you just talking about on the phone?" "Oh, just some old apartment building in Queens," he said dismissively. "It's been a headache for months. The tenants don't want to move out, even though I'm giving them money to help with relocation. Some people just don't understand that progress requires change." Isabella's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the restaurant would be able to hear it. "What's the address of that building?" she asked. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. "Let me see. It's 247 Maple Street. Why do you ask?" Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, holding Mia a little tighter. When she opened them again, Daniel Richardson was looking at her with concern. "Isabella, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "That's my home," she said quietly. 247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. That's where Mia and I live." The color drained from Daniel's face. "What did you say?" "You're tearing down my home tomorrow morning," Isabella said, her voice getting stronger. "My daughter and I are going to be homeless because of you." Daniel stared at her in shock. Around them, the other customers who had been pretending not to listen were now openly watching again. Robert Chen, who had returned to his own table, stood up and walked back over. "Daniel," Robert said quietly, "please tell me you're not actually going through with the demolition when there are still families living there." I gave them 6 months," Daniel stammered. "That's more than enough time to find new places." "Is it?" Isabella asked, her anger returning. "Do you know how much apartments cost in New York? Do you know how hard it is to find a place that's safe and affordable when you're a single mother making minimum wage?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. I offered relocation assistance." $2,000, Isabella said bitterly. "You offered $2,000 to help families find new homes in a city where the average rent is $4,000 a month. Do you know what $2,000 means to someone like me? It's 1 month's rent, if I'm lucky. It's not enough to pay for a security deposit and first month's rent somewhere else." The restaurant was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to listen. "I've been looking for 6 months," Isabella continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. 6 months of calling landlords who won't rent to me because I don't make enough money. 6 months of looking at apartments in neighborhoods where I'm afraid to walk alone at night. 6 months of lying awake worrying about what's going to happen to my daughter when we have nowhere to go. Daniel Richardson looked like he was going to be sick. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Of course you didn't know," Isabella said, standing up with Mia still in her arms. "Because you never bothered to find out. You see numbers on a spreadsheet, not people. You see profit margins, not families." Mia stirred in her arms and opened her eyes. "Mama, are you crying?" Isabella wiped her eyes quickly. "No, baby. Mama's just tired." But Mia was awake now, and she looked around the restaurant with curious eyes. She noticed Daniel Richardson, who was staring at them with an expression of complete devastation. "Are you the sad man from before?" Mia asked him. "Yes," Daniel said softly. "I'm the sad man." Mia studied his face for a moment. "Are you sadder now?" Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Why?" Mia asked with the innocent directness that only children have. Isabella was about to tell Mia not to bother the man, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the look on Daniel's face, or maybe she just wanted him to have to explain himself to a 7-year-old. "Because I did something very bad," Daniel told Mia. "I'm going to tear down your house tomorrow." Mia's eyes widened. "Our house? Where will we live?" "I don't know, baby," Isabella said, her voice breaking. "But don't worry. Mama will figure something out." But even as she said the words, Isabella felt hopeless. Tomorrow morning, she and Mia would have nowhere to go. She had $347 in her bank account. Her sister lived in California and couldn't help. She had no other family, no friends with extra room. "Can't you just not tear down our house?" Mia asked Daniel with the simple logic of a child. "It's not that simple," Daniel started to say, then stopped himself. Why wasn't it that simple? He owned the building. He could delay the demolition if he wanted to. but his investors were expecting to see progress. The Tokyo deal was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If he delayed the project, he could lose everything. "I have a business to run," he said weakly. "More important than people's homes?" Mia asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the restaurant was waiting for his answer. Daniel looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. He thought about what Isabella had said earlier, about how he was lonely because he had pushed everyone away. He thought about Emma, and how she would feel if she knew what he was about to do to another little girl and her mother. Then he looked at his phone, at the messages from his lawyers and investors and construction crews. All of them were depending on him to be ruthless, to put profit above people, to make the hard choices that successful businessmen have to make. But as he looked at Mia's innocent face and Isabella's desperate eyes, Daniel Richardson realized something that changed everything. He was tired of being that man. "You're right," he said quietly. "What?" Isabella asked. "You're right," he said louder, standing up from his chair. "Homes are more important than business deals." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Tom? It's Daniel Richardson. I need you to call off the demolition tomorrow. No, I don't care what the investors will say, because I said so, that's why." Isabella stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "I'm serious," Daniel said, hanging up the phone. "But that's not enough, is it? Just stopping the demolition doesn't solve your problem. You still can't afford to live in that building long-term, and you still can't find another place you can afford." Isabella nodded, not sure where he was going with this. "So here's what I'm going to do," Daniel continued. "I'm going to turn that building into affordable housing. Real affordable housing, not the fake kind where they charge $3,000 and call it affordable because it's less than $4,000. The entire restaurant erupted in murmurs of surprise. Robert Chun was smiling widely. "Furthermore," Daniel said, his voice getting stronger and more confident, "I'm going to do the same thing with 10 other buildings I own around the city, and I'm going to hire Isabella as my consultant." "What?" Isabella gasped. "You know what it's like to look for housing when you don't have much money?" Daniel explained. "You know what families need and what they can afford. I want you to help me figure out how to do this right." Isabella was so shocked she could barely speak. I don't know anything about real estate or business." "You know about life," Daniel said. "You know about taking care of people. That's more valuable than all the business degrees in the world." Mia clapped her hands together excitedly. "Does this mean we get to keep our house, Mama?" Isabella looked down at her daughter, then back at Daniel Richardson. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about his answer. "Because 17 years ago, I lost the most important thing in my life," he said finally. "And I've spent every day since then trying to fill that hole with money and power and control. But it never worked. The hole just got bigger." He looked at Mia, who was listening intently. "Today, a little girl asked me why I was sad, and her mother showed me kindness even after I had been cruel to her. They reminded me that there are things more important than money, like having a home, like being able to take care of the people you love." Isabella felt tears running down her cheeks, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief and hope. "Emma would be proud of you," she said softly. Daniel smiled for the first time since walking into the restaurant. "I hope so." Robert Chun walked over and put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "She would be," he said with certainty. "And Isabella, I hope you'll still want to work here at the restaurant too, though I suspect you're going to be very busy with your new consulting job." Isabella laughed through her tears. "I think I can manage both." "Can I help too?" Mia asked. "I know lots of things about houses." "What kind of things?" Daniel asked, crouching down so he was at eye level with her. "Like kids need safe places to play, and mamas need laundry rooms that don't smell funny, and everyone needs windows that let in lots of sunshine." Daniel nodded seriously. "Those are very important things to know. I think you're going to be an excellent consultant." As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Grandeur Restaurant, Isabella looked around at the faces surrounding her. Robert Chen, who had defended her against a billionaire. Daniel Richardson, who had changed his entire life's direction because of a conversation with a 7-year-old. The other customers, who had witnessed something extraordinary and were smiling at her with genuine happiness. 6 months ago, Isabella had been just another struggling single mother trying to make ends meet. This morning, she had been a waitress facing homelessness. But now, she was something she had never imagined she could be. Someone who could make a real difference in the world. "Mr. Richardson," she said, "I have one condition." "What's that?" "If I'm going to help you create affordable housing, I want to make sure we help other single mothers like me. Women who are working hard but just can't get ahead because the system is stacked against them." "Deal," Daniel said immediately. "What else?" Isabella thought for a moment. "I want to create a daycare center in each building, so mothers don't have to worry about their children while they're at work." "Done. And I want to make sure there are good schools nearby and safe playgrounds and—" Isabella stopped herself. "I'm getting carried away, aren't I?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "You're not getting carried away. You're thinking like someone who actually understands what families need. Keep going." As Isabella continued to share her ideas, Daniel Richardson realized something amazing. For the first time in 17 years, he was excited about the future. Not because of how much money he might make, but because of how many lives he might be able to change. And in that fancy restaurant in Manhattan, surrounded by people who had started as strangers and were becoming friends, Isabella Martinez learned something too. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let someone else's pain turn you into a person you don't want to be. 6 months later, the first of Daniel Richardson's affordable housing projects opened its doors. It was a beautiful building with a daycare center, a community garden, and apartments that families could actually afford. Isabella had her own office on the first floor with a sign on the door that read, "Isabella Martinez, Director of Family Services." And every Friday, Daniel Richardson would come to the building not to check on his investment, but to have lunch with Isabella and Mia in the community room, where he would listen to stories about Emma while Mia told him about her week at school. Because sometimes the most successful business deals are the ones that aren't about business at all. The end. Thank you for watching this incredible story of courage, compassion, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs to hear that one person's kindness can change everything. What did you think of Isabella's brave response? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more inspiring stories like this one.